The storm hit without a warning, tearing their boat apart as the ocean swallowed them whole. Stranded in the open sea, their only hope was a dolphin. Yes, a dolphin that seemed to guide them toward safety. But when a menacing fishing boat appeared, everything changed. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The churning sea roared in their ears, a relentless force swallowing the remnants of the boat, as Nate's hands gripped the wheel one last time, fingers slipping off the wet surface. His heartbeat thundered in his chest, outpacing the pounding of the waves. His thoughts, always sharp in moments of crisis, had turned to jumbled confusion. This wasn't supposed to happen. This wasn't how it was meant to end. He had been a captain for over a decade. The ocean had always been an old friend, a dependable one, with predictable rhythms and patterns. But this was a betrayal. Chris was the first to spot the lifeboat. He grabbed Jason's arm and tugged him towards it, but their eyes were wide with the same horror that had been gnawing at Nate since the boat first lurched beneath their feet. They were adrift in an endless ocean, the horizon mocking them with its stillness, a cruel reminder that rescue would not come easily. Chris's voice shook as he tried to steady himself, his hands trembling as he adjusted the life vest. We can't just float here forever, can we? His words felt hollow, lost in the roaring wind. Jason didn't answer, staring at the wreckage of the boat. He was a man of few words, but now, more than ever, his silence felt like a void. Jason had always kept to himself, stoic, withdrawn, and hard to read. But today his eyes betrayed an unease far beyond the calm exterior he worked so hard to maintain. This wasn't about the boat. This wasn't about the lost gear or the lost catch. This was about something deeper, something that stirred in the pit of his stomach. There was no plan, no way out, and that was terrifying. Nate, still caught in the grips of a captain's instinct, moved like a man possessed, trying to get any semblance of order back into the situation. But the storm was relentless. Water was sloshing against their legs now, and every passing moment felt like a weight bearing down on their chest. "We need to stay together," Nate barked. His voice was hoarse from shouting, panic creeping in like the waves that threatened to swallow them whole. The storm had made sure of that. Every attempt to salvage the boat had only deepened the despair. They were sinking. There was no denying it now. The boat, their once proud vessel, was nothing but a distant memory now, swallowed by the sea. And then something shifted in the water, something that caught Nate's eye, a flicker, a shadow under the surface. He didn't know what it was at first, some trick of the light, the last gasps of the storm. But then a figure surfaced, its sleek, glistening body cutting through the water like a blade. A dolphin, and it was moving in their direction. Nate's heart raced, but not from fear. This was something different. This wasn't an ordinary encounter with wildlife. The dolphin didn't shy away like they normally did. It approached them, gliding smoothly through the chaos. Something about the way it moved felt deliberate, purposeful even. The storm raged on, but here was this creature, almost serene in its grace. Nate blinked, disbelieving. This could not be real. "Is that?" Chris muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, awe and uncertainty creeping into his tone. For a fleeting moment it felt as though time slowed. The storm seemed to quiet just enough to let them take in what was happening. The dolphin circled them, almost as if it were guiding them. Nate's thoughts flashed. Guiding them? But to where? But then the dolphin's behavior took a more unexpected turn. It dived, its body disappearing beneath the surface, only to reappear moments later, closer now, and it circled again, closer still, its movements smooth and steady, each pass drawing them further away from the sinking remains of their boat and toward something safer. The lifeboat rocked gently with the rhythm of the waves, the men barely clinging to its fragile hull. Cold and drenched, they were past the point of exhaustion, fighting both the storm and their own creeping despair. The ocean stretched out before them, an endless sheet of gray, indistinguishable from the sky above, swallowing the horizon whole. The sun was hidden, choked out by the swirling clouds, and the rain never stopped falling, each drop like a shard of ice against their skin. They could hear only the howl of the wind and the occasional crash of a distant wave. The storm's ferocity didn't seem to let up, and each passing minute felt like an eternity. Nate stared into the void of the sea, his mind spinning between thoughts of survival and futile regrets. He was a man of the ocean. He knew it, had lived it, had trusted it for years. But this was something different. This wasn't the wild beauty of the ocean he'd grown up knowing. This was its cruel, unforgiving face. And yet, despite the chaos, despite the storm that seemed to take joy in their struggle, something lingered in the back of his mind. He couldn't place it, but there was something else out here. Something waiting. Suddenly, a sound broke through the roar of the storm. A sharp whistle, almost like a breath, a sound unlike anything they had heard in the turmoil. The wind seemed to hush for a fraction of a second, just enough for the men to hear it again, a series of clicks, rhythmic and distinct. Nate's head snapped up, his instincts kicking in. "What the hell was that?" he murmured, but the others were already on alert. And then it appeared, a slick, smooth body cutting through the water, gliding with effortless grace. A dolphin. The creature was unperturbed by the storm, its dark, sleek skin glistening as it circled the raft with a purposeful motion. Nate squinted, unsure if he was imagining it. The dolphin moved closer, nudging the raft gently as if to prod them, urge them forward. At first, Nate thought it was just another random encounter, a sea creature unaffected by the chaos that had consumed them. But there was something about the way it moved, deliberate, patient, and oddly reassuring. Chris, hunched over from exhaustion, stared at the dolphin in disbelief. His face was pale, lips cracked from the salt water. "Is it trying to help us?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the storm. Jason was quieter, always the observer, but even he couldn't deny the strangeness of the situation. "It's guiding us," he said slowly, his voice tinged with awe and confusion. His eyes locked onto the dolphin's smooth, fluid motions, following the way it weaved through the waves with ease, each pass bringing it closer to them. The creature didn't seem to care about the storm. It was as though the tempest didn't touch it at all. For the first time in what felt like forever, the men felt something other than hopelessness. A strange flicker of possibility stirred within them. The dolphin's movements were precise, purposeful, not erratic like most of the creatures they'd seen in these waters. It returned again, nudging the raft, urging them to follow. The men exchanged wary glances, unsure of what to do, but something, perhaps a deep primal instinct, compelled them to trust it. "Follow it," Nate said, his voice barely a rasp above the wind. It wasn't a command, but a desperate plea. He didn't know why, but the sight of that dolphin, so calm, so confident in its own skin, was the first real sign of hope they'd seen since the boat had gone down. So they followed, paddling weakly in its wake, the raft moving slowly through the turbulent sea. The dolphin stayed close, sometimes breaking the surface to click at them, as if encouraging them onward. Each time it surfaced, the distance to the shape on the horizon grew shorter. It was an island, an uncharted island, its jagged silhouette looming ahead, standing as an anomaly in a sea that had swallowed so much. It felt too perfect, too unreal to be true, and yet it was there, steadfast and waiting, like a beacon. The men were too tired to question it further. They just followed, trusting that the creature, whatever strange force it represented, knew something they didn't, something that might lead them to safety. The salt water clung to the men's skin, their muscles sore and stiff from hours of clinging to the raft, but the sight of the island ahead had ignited a flicker of something deep inside them, a spark of hope that had been nearly extinguished in the chaos of the storm. The dolphin, undeterred by the still churning waters, continued to lead them onward, its sleek body slicing through the waves like it had been born to navigate these very seas. With every stroke of the paddle, the island loomed closer, its silhouette more defined against the gray sky. But as the men allowed themselves to believe in the possibility of safety, the horizon shifted yet again. From the fog of the storm's aftermath, a dark shape began to materialize. Another boat, cutting through the murky waters with an unsettling precision. The men's immediate relief was short-lived. They had seen enough by now to recognize the outline of a fishing vessel, but this one was unlike the friendly Coast Guard or rescue teams they had hoped for. No, this one radiated a different kind of presence, a presence that was sharp, aggressive, and territorial. The boat pulled alongside them with an unnerving calmness. The captain, a man with a thick beard and a hard-set face, leaned over the edge, his eyes narrowing as he took in the sight of the 3 bedraggled men clinging to the lifeboat. His voice was as rough as the weathered wood of his boat. "You're trespassing!" he barked, his words a brutal command rather than a suggestion. "This is my territory." The men, too weary and confused to fully process what was happening, could only stare back, disbelief etching their faces. Nate, always the one to take charge, fought to hold his ground. His voice, hoarse from dehydration, barely rose above the storm's fading fury. "We're stranded. We need help. We've been lost out here for hours," he pleaded, but the captain, unmoved, sneered. The man's gaze hardened, and he spat into the water. "I don't care about your sob story. You're in my waters now. Stay where you are. I don't want to see you anywhere near my land." The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, more about power than anything else. His crew, standing at the ready, watched silently, awaiting orders, their faces as grim and unwelcoming as their captain's. The tension in the air thickened, coiling like a storm cloud about to burst. Nate could feel his pulse quicken, the fight-or-flight instinct kicking in, but what could they do? They had no strength left, no resources to resist. They were at the mercy of the sea, and now, apparently, of this gruff stranger. But before Nate could formulate a response, something unexpected happened. The Dolphin, whose presence had seemed like an eerie omen of hope, suddenly shot through the water like an arrow. It breached beside the raft, its powerful tail slapping the surface of the water with an almost violent force, sending a spray of seawater over the side of Mike's boat. For a moment, there was only chaos, the sudden, explosive motion of the Dolphin disorienting the crew aboard the fishing boat. The men in the raft froze, shocked by the force of the disruption. But it was enough. In that split second of confusion, the crew of Mike's boat faltered, scrambling to regain control. The tension, the threat, everything, their position of power, cracked. The men seized the opportunity. With whatever strength they could muster, they pushed away from the boat, slowly, cautiously, but steadily, drifting farther from the hostile captain. The Dolphin, ever vigilant, circled beneath them, its presence a silent but powerful ally. The boat slowly pulled back, as if uncertain what to make of the Dolphin's unexpected intervention. Mike shouted orders, but the crew, now distracted and off balance, couldn't react quickly enough. The raft, propelled by shaky paddles and the last remnants of their will, moved toward the island, toward safety. And as the men finally neared the shore, their hearts still pounding from the near miss, they couldn't help but look back. Mike's boat was drifting away, the captain still shouting, but it didn't matter now. The Dolphin had done what it had come to do, had saved them once more. The men, too stunned to speak, could only watch as the creature disappeared back into the depths of the ocean, as silent and mysterious as it had first appeared. The island, though small, was an oasis compared to the vast, indifferent ocean they had just barely escaped. It was a place of relief, where the men's bodies, battered and exhausted, could finally collapse in a semblance of safety. They had no idea how long they would be stranded there, but the sight of the passing boat hours later felt like a dream. The vessel, a civilian one, had been notified of their distress signal by a random passerby who had spotted the flares they'd launched earlier in the day. There was no grand rescue, no coordinated mission by the authorities. It was luck, a cruel twist of fate, that had brought them to this moment. Nate, Chris, and Jason climbed aboard the boat, their limbs heavy, their minds fogged by exhaustion. But as they set off toward the shore, the reality of their miraculous survival began to sink in. The storm, the sinking boat, the threatening fishermen. Each part of their ordeal felt like an impossible story, something that couldn't possibly be real. Yet, here they were, alive, as if fate had extended its hand just in time. But the true twist was only just beginning. Hours later, as the world tuned in to the latest viral stories, a video began to circulate, footage captured by one of the fishermen's smartphones before their boat sank. The camera had been shaky, but the images were clear. A dolphin, swimming gracefully through the tempestuous waters, guiding the men to safety. It wasn't just the miraculous rescue from the storm. No, it was the moment when the dolphin had confronted the threatening fishing boat, leaping from the water in a show of defiance, flipping its tail with such power that it sent waves crashing into Mike's vessel, causing the crew to scramble in confusion. The sheer audacity of the dolphin's intervention struck a chord with viewers. The video spread like wildfire. People were captivated by the footage, how nature itself had intervened at the most pivotal moment. News outlets picked up the story. Social media exploded with hashtags like #DolphinSavior, #Miracle in the Sea, and #Nature Strikes Back. The men, still grappling with the gravity of their ordeal, were thrust into the spotlight, their faces plastered across screens everywhere. For them, it felt surreal, almost too strange to comprehend. They had simply survived. How had it become so much more than that? Interviews followed. Nate, Chris, and Jason spoke candidly about their experience, each of them speaking with a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. Nate's voice cracked as he described the moment they realized they were safe, how the dolphin had saved them, not just from the storm, but from the perilous situation with Mike. They described the terror of seeing the boat approaching, how helpless they had felt as Mike shouted at them, his crew looming like predators. But none of that mattered anymore. It was the dolphin who had taken control, who had shown them that survival often comes from the most unlikely of places. In the days that followed, a wave of support washed over the men. People from all corners of the world reached out, some offering donations, others simply sending messages of hope and solidarity. The video had become a symbol, not just of rescue, but of resilience. It was a reminder that sometimes miracles don't come from human hands. They come from nature, from the most unexpected corners of the earth. And in this case, it came in the form of a dolphin, a creature of the sea capable of compassion in a way that no one could have predicted. The men, overwhelmed by the outpouring of love, found themselves united by something deeper than mere survival. They were connected by an experience that transcended the physical. Their bond with the dolphin, this mysterious savior from the deep, had become an emblem of hope, of survival against the odds. The story, filled with fear, wonder, and an inexplicable twist of fate, had turned into something much larger, a message to the world that salvation, at times, comes from the wildest, most untamed forces. And in the end, it was this message that would continue to resonate long after the storm had passed,